Sometimes the chasm between an abuser and their victim seems insurmountable, and protecting oneself from a predator appears impossible. Yet it happens that even a child can find within themselves an incredible life force capable of standing up to a true criminal. Saeri had no doubt that she inherited her unbreakable spirit and ability to overcome life's most difficult trials from her resilient and determined father. The girl was born in 1980 in the United States, becoming the first child of American Patricia and Middle Eastern immigrant Ahmet Wakefield. Her father had emigrated from Iran to Pensacola, Florida, seeking to fulfill his American dream. The man was fortunate to establish himself in his new homeland and meet a woman for whom he felt deep emotions. They married, and Ahmet felt happy. However, problems arose immediately. Patricia turned out to be a capricious person prone to unpredictable behavior. At first, Ahmet attributed this to cultural differences of the American lifestyle and tried to be understanding. With serious intentions to build a strong family, he hoped that having a child would change everything for the better. The birth of their firstborn Saeri indeed became a joyful event for the family. The family later grew. 2 years later, a second daughter Sara was born, followed by a son Arash. But it was during this period that the couple's relationship began to crack. Patricia's character proved to be difficult and confrontational. Her behavior was radically different from what a man of Eastern upbringing expected. She showed neither organization nor flexibility, and her actions often seemed unacceptable to him. He was particularly outraged by his wife's penchant for nightlife, alcohol, and psychoactive substances. Despite Ahmet working tirelessly to provide for the family, Patricia showed indifference to the children's needs and her husband's concerns. Over time, Ahmet became increasingly aware that his wife simply wasn't suited for the role of mother and homemaker. Their approaches to raising children were diametrically opposed. While the father insisted on order and proper care for the children, the mother was completely unconcerned. She was only interested in her own entertainment. The last straw came after another loud party and argument. Ahmet realized he could no longer tolerate this. Irreconcilable differences led to a difficult divorce process. The main stumbling block was Patricia's desire to obtain exclusive custody of the children and completely deprive the father of any contact with them. At the time of divorce, Saeri was 5 years old, Sara was 3, and Arash was still a toddler. Despite Patricia being far from meeting the standards of a responsible mother, her status as a U.S. citizen gave her advantages in court. She obtained primary custody rights. The court ruling required Ahmet to pay child support while allowing only occasional visits with the children. This arrangement categorically did not suit the father. He himself sought full custody, being convinced that his irresponsible ex-wife couldn't properly care for 3 children. In his conviction, Patricia posed a danger to the children, but the judicial system remained indifferent to his arguments. Bitterly experiencing this injustice, Ahmet eventually left Florida and settled in Rochester, New York, where he decided to start a new life. The persistent immigrant quickly arranged his personal life, remarried and built a successful career. His second choice proved to be a true homemaker and caring mother who excellently raised children from her previous marriage. But even years later, the fate of his children from his first marriage gave Ahmet no peace. He was depressed by the inability to spend as much time with them as he would have liked. Moreover, during each visit, he noticed increasingly alarming signs of the home atmosphere and changes in the behavior of his growing children. Despite conscientiously fulfilling court obligations, regularly paying child support and visiting the children, Ahmet saw that they were undernourished. He knew that during this period Patricia was supposedly trying to overcome her addiction to psychoactive substances. Though trying was clearly an overstatement. Her apartment had become a gathering place for dubious young people who appeared with increasing frequency. The daughters told their father horrifying details of what they witnessed, and it was obvious this couldn't end well. Ahmet suspected that visitors were using illegal substances with his ex-wife in front of the children, and was convinced the children were in danger. The father repeatedly filed court petitions for full custody rights, seeking to take the children to live with him. But each time his requests were denied. Ahmet was convinced his foreign origin was an obstacle. Many people shared this opinion, an American in a similar situation wouldn't have such difficulties fighting for children. And his ex-wife seemed to take pleasure in destroying the lives of both the children and Ahmet himself. Living with Patricia had been a difficult ordeal from the beginning, and Ahmet's fears for the children proved entirely justified. Due to addiction issues, the woman regularly had problems with law enforcement. The children were essentially growing up without maternal care. Her methods of upbringing were complete disregard for child safety. She could leave them unsupervised for long hours while spending time in bars. The mother usually returned intoxicated and in a bad mood, and could resort to physical violence. Brutal profanity became routine, the children no longer reacted to offensive words. The same could continue in the morning due to hangovers, reaching the point where the enraged woman would extinguish cigarettes on the children. When Ahmet tried to discuss this with his ex-wife, she justified herself with the need for discipline and punishment, threatening to give the children to a shelter. The father was powerless. He feared the children might be placed in foster families, and then he would permanently lose contact with them. Of course, Ahmet was shocked by such methods of upbringing, and the judicial system's indifference. Already at an early age, Saeri took on maternal duties for the younger ones, cooking for them, caring for and looking after them. The schoolgirl made sure all three didn't miss the school bus. Additionally, she learned to avoid her mother, as every encounter with her resulted in humiliation and physical pain. While Patricia spent time at numerous parties, in unfamiliar bars and homes throughout the city, the breaks between her appearances at home could last several days in a row. The strongest friendship formed between the girls, as 6-year-old Sara was already old enough to support 8-year-old Saeri in caring for their brother and performing household duties. The sisters became so close that they even chose identical clothes and had similar appearances, which often led others to perceive them as twins. Unfortunately, Patricia's chaotic relationships and unpredictable behavior had not yet reached their peak at that point. The irresponsible mother began a relationship with a man named Raymond Wake. At first, this man gave the impression of being a friendly person, demonstrating warmth in communication with the children, even bringing sweets and gifts that the children saw extremely rarely, which immediately endeared them to such a generous visitor. However, behind this feigned friendliness hid a criminal with a criminal past, including burglary, possession of illegal substances, and rape. Patricia had no idea about Ray's dark past, but Ahmet had no doubt that even this information wouldn't have prevented his ex-wife, who had sunk to rock bottom, from continuing the acquaintance and developing a relationship with a potential criminal. On the contrary, she felt satisfaction that Ray took on some of the childcare duties, and now she could completely rid herself of responsibility. Maternal indifference combined with alcohol addiction created ideal conditions for Raymond to fulfill his perverted desires. The initial fascination with friendly Ray quickly transformed into an anxious feeling. Despite her young age, Saeri almost immediately noticed strange peculiarities in the man's behavior. Even when in the company of several adults, the mother's lover seemed to show no interest in communicating with peers. Raymond looked for any excuse to be alone with the girls, invariably appearing during their bathing. When he stayed overnight at their home, he could enter the bedroom after Saeri and Sara had gone to rest, standing silently in the corner for a long time, watching them. The older sister repeatedly caught the man's strange and frightening gaze upon her. She shared her observations with her sister, and she fully understood what Saeri was talking about. She also felt an unpleasant sensation when the man watched them, and both felt strong fear of him. Ray's desire to be near other people's children in close contact aroused deep suspicion in the girls. Over time, Ray first attacked the older girl and raped her, threatening to hurt her brother and sister if she told anyone. Ray brutally abused her, making efforts not to leave visible marks. However, Saeri wasn't planning to tell anyone anyway, as she felt real fear for her relative's fate. The man wasn't concerned about the possibility of being caught by Patricia, as she either didn't appear at home at all or was in a state of deep alcohol intoxication and physically couldn't defend the children. Several months passed in this regime of regular rapes until Patricia finally ended her relationship with Ray. The woman herself suffered from her lover's drunken aggression, and realizing she had tied her life to a dangerous person, she decided to break off the relationship. Amit never learned about the nightmare Saeri experienced at that time. She herself felt enormous relief when Ray disappeared from their existence, but the joy proved premature. At this time, the woman began visiting bars even more intensively and disappearing for even longer periods, abandoning the children alone for whole days. She chose alcohol and casual relationships instead of fulfilling the duties of a proper mother. On September 21, 1988, Patricia went to another party, leaving her new boyfriend in the apartment. A few hours later, he left the dwelling and joined her at the bar. For 8-year-old Saeri, there was nothing extraordinary about this, as she had long ago taken on maternal duties for her relatives. The girl had prepared school lunches for everyone in the evening, prepared clothes, and put everyone to bed, postponing some tasks until morning. She usually gathered her brother and sister for school, so she woke up much earlier to manage everything and leave the house faster before mother appeared at home. As a rule, Patricia hadn't returned by this time yet. The children made efforts not to cross paths with their mother, seeking to avoid another quarrel and possible insults. Unfortunately, a much worse encounter awaited her that night. Suddenly in the middle of the night, the girl opened her eyes, feeling that something wrong was happening in the room. Waking up in her bed, Saeri noticed a dark silhouette of an adult in the room. Looking more carefully, she realized it was Ray. The family lived on the first floor of an apartment building, and getting inside through the back entrance wasn't difficult. The mother's ex-boyfriend immediately woke the girls, after which he forced them to follow him to a green Dodge Monaco pickup truck that was parked under the windows. After that, he drove them toward the forest. Ray assured them he intended to take them to their mother, who was supposedly at his place. The older girl was convinced of his lie but couldn't do anything and only hoped for the best. They never reached their destination. Worried, Saeri peered into the darkness, trying to orient herself where they were and what was happening at all. The girl made efforts to hide her growing panic and wiped away tears when Ray opened the doors. The man asked her if she had told anyone about their secret. The girl shook her head negatively, which pleased Ray. The man again promised that the sisters would soon be able to meet their mother, but only on the condition of obedient behavior. Raymond took something from the trunk and tied Sara up in the back seat. He pulled Saeri outside and began whipping her in the trunk. Her sister heard screams and asked her what was happening, but the older girl remained silent about the truth. She only calmed her sister, assuring her that everything would be fine and they would return home soon. Suddenly the light of an approaching car appeared. Ray hastily climbed out of the trunk and ordered her not to make a sound, returned to the front seat of the car. He forced the girls to lower their heads down and maintain silence. The car stopped nearby. Raymond approached the driver, and they exchanged a few phrases. Soon the car drove away, taking with it the last chance for rescue. Ray took the driver's seat and directed the car deeper into the forest thicket, where they were guaranteed not to be found. After that, the man opened the front passenger doors and began raping Saeri in the front seat. This time right in front of her sister's eyes. Frightened Sara was crying but was powerless to do anything. Closer to morning, Ray finally calmed down. He untied Sara and ordered the girls to leave the car. The sisters' torture had already lasted several hours in a row. Raymond led them deep into the forest, while he maintained silence the entire time, completely ignoring any questions. Saeri told her sister that she didn't believe his words about meeting their mother. Patricia indeed had no idea what was happening. She was too busy at another bar to worry about her daughters. The situation looked even more threatening when the man began tying Sara's hands and feet. Ray put both girls on their knees and ordered them to pray. Standing behind, the criminal took out a large knife and struck Saeri in the neck area. From surprise, she fell but remained conscious. She felt her clothes instantly soaking with blood but decided to play dead so the criminal would stop striking. The older one watched as he moved toward Sara. The younger girl tried to resist the attacker. Of course, the forces were too unequal. The bound victim didn't even have the opportunity to try to escape. She received several fatal wounds and also fell to the ground in a pool of blood. Saeri watched all this and continued to play dead, praying in her thoughts that he would just go away. The attacker stepped over her body, and the older child listened to the sound of his footsteps receding into the darkness. As soon as the engine rumbled and the vehicle left the forest area, Saeri got to her feet and immediately hurried to her younger sister. At first, the girl tried to bring Sara to consciousness, pleadingly asking her to wake up so they could both get help. When it became clear that her sister wasn't responding to calls, Saeri decided to call someone for help. Deep inside, the child already realized the terrible truth: her younger sister had passed away. Pressing her hand to the wound from which blood was oozing, the older girl headed toward the highway that ran along the forest strip. The child understood the criticality of the situation. They both needed urgent medical support. The first car passing by stopped on the shoulder. In the cabin was an elderly couple. They were stunned by the appearance of a child covered in blood from head to toe. Saeri told them about the need for help for her sister and showed the approximate direction in the forest, after which she lost consciousness. At 6:30 in the morning, the couple contacted emergency services 911. The child who miraculously survived was taken to a medical facility for emergency care. The medics couldn't comprehend how the girl survived with such massive blood loss and trauma. Surviving the attack was only the beginning of trials for Saeri. She was delivered to the hospital in extremely critical condition. According to medical records, the child had to be resuscitated 3 times during the medics' fight for her life. Due to significant blood loss, a transfusion was needed. The medical staff considered the girl's rescue a true miracle. In a way, the blade passed literally a few millimeters from the jugular artery. A little more, and the result would have been fatal. If the vessel had been damaged, the child couldn't have reached the highway. Most likely, she would have lost consciousness in the forest and died from blood loss. According to doctors, ahead was a long recovery process associated with physical suffering and pain. Undoubtedly, psychological trauma was added to this. When law enforcement contacted the girl's mother, Patricia was still coming to her senses after a night of drinking in her apartment. The woman hadn't even noticed the absence of her daughters in the apartment. As soon as Saeri regained consciousness and could speak, the girl immediately asked about Sara. By that time, police already had information about the second child. Her lifeless body was found in the forest area where Saeri had indicated. Death was instantaneous. There was no possibility of saving the child. Brave Saeri immediately became a key witness for law enforcement. She wanted to talk to detectives as soon as possible. As soon as the opportunity arose, the girl provided police with a detailed description of Ray's green vehicle and the criminal's appearance. They managed to identify him the same day. The man was at his parents' house. The car was there too. An experienced investigator needed only one look through the window to notice bloody clothes in the cabin. When someone knocked on Raymond's door, he ignored the sounds, pretending no one was home. But when the phone rang, he answered the call. The emergency dispatcher informed the criminal about the house being surrounded by police and the demand to surrender. Realizing the hopelessness of the situation, the man didn't resist and came out with his hands raised, surrendering to law enforcement. Despite all the burden that fell on the child, Saeri was determined to testify against the criminal in court to achieve justice for her deceased sister. Her courage impressed everyone present. Eventually, the judicial system recognized that the children were in danger due to the mother's negligence and sided with Ahmet. The man was allowed to obtain custody of his son and daughter. When the girl's condition improved and she was discharged from the hospital, the father took both children to Rochester. There he already lived with his new wife, who gladly accepted the children who had experienced all these horrors with their mother. They were supported and helped to adapt to new conditions. The family became large as the stepmother had her own children. Finally, the brother and sister could feel the stability and protection of relatives who cared. From the beginning, Ray denied his involvement in the attack on the children. However, searches of the house and car allowed finding numerous important evidence. First of all, traces of male fluid on his clothes, in the car, and on Saeri's body, which confirmed the fact of The most significant evidence against the accused was the testimony of the girl who miraculously survived the attack. However, investigators needed considerable time to gather all this into a coherent prosecution version with which the prosecutor's office was ready to appear in court. The hearings began in mid-1989. At that time, Ray didn't admit guilt in murder, kidnapping, and attempted murder. According to the accused, someone stole his car on the night of the children's kidnapping. He was drinking and smoking marijuana at home at this time, so he didn't even notice when it happened. The investigators were convinced of Ray's lies. According to the prosecution's version, he broke down the doors of his ex-girlfriend's apartment around 1 o'clock in the morning. After that, he took Saeri and her sister Sara, staging a bloody massacre in the forest. At the time the hearings began, the survivor was 9 years old. She was still full of determination to achieve justice, so without hesitation, she traveled from her father's home in Rochester to Florida. Ray during the process constantly tried to pressure the child, staring at her with a threatening gaze. But this didn't prevent Saeri from telling in detail about the events of that terrible night. It was thanks to her that they managed to find her sister's body approximately 150 meters from the road near the forest massif. The girl was tied by hands and feet, had a fatal neck wound. It was inflicted by the same principle as Saeri's. At the scene were tire tracks that matched the tread pattern of Ray's car wheels. Detectives found pieces of fabric with blood traces, which later turned out to be parts of clothing found in the defendant's car. Ahmet grieved heavily the loss of his younger daughter Sara. He anxiously awaited the court's decision and hoped that this time justice would finally be on their side. Patricia showed much less interest in the trial. It seemed for her all this was just another reason to drink. The defendant had no intention of giving up, as it was about a whole list of crimes punishable by death. Therefore, in his opinion, there was nothing to lose. Despite all the evidence that the prosecution considered indisputable, Ray continued to insist on his version with the car theft, and called the rest planted evidence. When this didn't work, he began claiming that the police broke the law by arresting him without a warrant. The court rejected these claims. Even without physical evidence found after the arrest, there were sufficient grounds to detain the suspect. From the very beginning, the prosecution acted more confidently, and the lawyer seemed to believe in his client's guilt himself. Therefore, he focused not on denying guilt but on trying to avoid the death penalty. The jury predictably found Ray guilty of first-degree murder, kidnapping, rape, and attempted murder. It was decided that the deserved punishment for him would be the death penalty. Not agreeing with the verdict, Raymond and his lawyer began to act. A whole series of appeals and other legal maneuvers began, which constantly postponed the execution of the sentence and allowed him to continue living in prison despite the court's decision. Probably, he hated his little victim with all his heart, whom he couldn't defeat. Ray even continued trying to reach Saeri, regularly sending threatening letters, calling her a liar who undeservedly deprived an honest person of freedom. However, now the brave girl didn't take his threats seriously. Living with her stepmother and father, she felt truly protected. Ahmet created a favorable stable environment for her, which she hadn't known before this time. Outwardly everything looked good, but suddenly Patricia intervened in this idyll again. Despite all previous violations, she tried to regain custody of the children. This led to a lengthy trial, and Ahmet desperately fought to prevent any meetings with the mother at all. The children themselves didn't want to see her after everything they had experienced. They blamed her, in particular, for Sara's death. However, the failed mother managed to achieve that the children periodically visited her and spent vacations with her. Everything experienced should have brought Patricia to her senses, but she didn't change her cruel habits. The woman continued to use alcohol and illegal substances, losing control, taking it out on the children. Already during the first vacation, after several days of drinking, she lost self-control, beat the children and burned them with cigarettes. Unfortunately, Ahmet again couldn't do anything. The law was openly blind. Patricia herself didn't allow the children to get help. Police officers seemed to ignore all statements about domestic violence. Social workers who regularly appeared at their home also seemed to notice nothing. When Saeri and Arash grew up, they gained the right to decide independently how to live. The teenagers, of course, didn't want to visit their mother, literally begging their father not to send them to Florida. Eventually, both completely severed any ties with their mother. Patricia wasn't going to give up easily, continuing to look for ways to take the children. Ahmet was forced to turn to the New York judicial system to obtain full custody rights. He couldn't completely exclude communication with the mother, as this proved legally impossible. In Florida, the court claimed that establishing Patricia's full custody was only a temporary measure. Despite the entire history of contemptuous and openly dangerous treatment of children, the judge claimed that the woman wasn't responsible for what happened to Sara and Saeri. It was entirely Ray's fault. All this led to launching a whole campaign designed to force the court to reconsider the decision in Ahmet's favor. The children still refused to meet with Patricia, but progress was achieved only through enlisting local community support. Several public demonstrations were organized, calling on Patricia and the courts to transfer full custody rights to the father forever. This lasted quite a long time but eventually helped. The woman withdrew her appeal to the court, as Saeri was soon to turn 18. Therefore, forcing the girl to return to Florida against her will became impossible. The mother seemed completely uninterested in obtaining custody of her son, or simply tired of court proceedings. In any case, she stopped appealing to the courts. In Ahmet's opinion, the reason for such behavior of the judicial system lay in his origin. But he was happy that everything worked out after so many years of effort. After graduating from high school, Saeri entered university and obtained higher education in criminal law. From the moment of the attack in the forest, the pursuit of justice became her passion. Initially, Saeri joined the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and also worked on projects related to combating child exploitation. She served as a New York State police officer. In 2004, she was informed that Ray had died of a heart attack. The criminal spent over 15 years constantly filing appeals to avoid the death penalty. But even on his deathbed, he remained a cruel monster in the memory of all who knew him. Instead of repenting for his evil deeds or at least confessing, he wrote a final mocking letter addressed to Saeri. In it, Ray detailed mockery of that ill-fated night in the forest. Instead of pain or anger, Saeri saw this as an opportunity to become stronger. She had seen with her own eyes how her younger sister was killed, received a wound that by all indications should have been fatal for her. But still survived that terrible night. Fortunately, Mother Patricia also failed to destroy her happy childhood. Ray never managed to break her spirit with regular threats and mockery. Despite cruelties and difficulties, Saeri became a person who serves honor and justice. With these thoughts, she read the last letter written by the criminal. In it, she saw only the bitterness of defeat that he felt, having failed to cope with a defenseless child. Saeri was far demonstrated incredible resilience. After all these events, she married her beloved named Kelly. In 2010, the couple had a son named Noah. In 2016, she received a promotion to the position of detective in New York. This entire story became known to the general public only in 2022, when the woman openly told about it while receiving congratulations on a memorable date. At that time, Saeri had dedicated over 10 years to service in law enforcement. According to her words, this was done in memory of Sister Sara, to whom fate was not so kind. Throughout her career, Saeri paid special attention to the importance of fighting criminals prone to sexual violence. In those distant years, Ray was not committing violent attacks for the first time, and he could have been isolated from society. But the authorities simply didn't have a system that would allow tracking all such criminals. Although Saeri isn't sure that with the mother's indifference this would have somehow helped protect her and her sister. The survivor has repeatedly spoken to various groups dealing with combating the consequences of parental neglect. Telling by her own example how she was able to survive terrible events and not just maintain faith in herself, but also in humanity. Please write your thoughts and reactions in the comments below. For those who are new here, subscribing is the best way to stay updated on future content. Also give a like please. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Thank you for your support during this difficult time. Until next time, friends.